So it looks like this is going to be, I guess, the three of us.
Okay.
Michael is here as well. Right. So as I was actually just kidding with Sandy about having a quiz, but I thought it might be a nice idea to just like review a couple of things that we've talked about as we go along. So I just start with the question of what is Nusach, and you guys remember what we talked about that
Right.
first class what a Nusach is? Michael, do you want to?
Remember, did it mean method?
Method. Oh,
System.
Michael thinks Nusach means method, which you can make a case for that.
I would have said before, I would have said like melody the
Yeah.
first time, and then I
Right.
know that was wrong, so I
Yeah.
thought
Well,
it was
yes and no.
something.
Yeah, yes and no. So Michael said method and melody. Anyone want to add to that definition of Nusach?
Well, I always thought Nusach, I always used the term Nusach to refer to the tune of something. But then I'm pretty sure the first week I learned that that wasn't the case, but I just don't remember what it
I always consider Nusach to be tradition.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's tradition could also be, you could make a case, you can make a case colloquially for it being tradition, but
Yeah.
not etymologically. So,
I thought minhag was tradition.
well, minhag is more, yeah, minhag is tradition or custom.
Custom.
Like, you talk about minhag hamakom.
Yeah.
No, we only wear purple yarmulkes when the Patriots win. That's minhag
Right,
hamakom.
right.
You know.
I didn't get the memo.
You get the memo, right? You know, I'm just making that up, right, as a minhag, right? So, but you know, when you and Michael both say melody, that there's a very, yes, the answer is yes. Yes, and yes, but. So Nusach is also, it also means the format and the text. The format and the text. So when you look, like you go to the Israel bookshop or someplace else, you're gonna buy a Siddur, and it might say, you know, most of the time it'll say Nusach Ashkenaz or Nusach Sfarad, right? So if you look, it's not like Harry Potter when you open up the book and it sings to you in Ashkenazic, you know, or Sephardic melody, right? It has to do with the structure and text. So for instance, I mentioned this in the first class, Nusach is, you know, is the order and structure of services. Like for instance, for example, in the Sephardic tradition, you will not find Yizkor anywhere. I think I mentioned this in the first class, because that's not part of the Nusach of the Sephardim. They don't have that as part of their tradition. That's an example of a Nusach. You know, when you recite, if you ever go to a Sephardic shul, or even like if you go to a Chabad, you know, or a Sephardic, and Chabad actually follows Nusach Sfarad most of the time, which is really kind of interesting. But when they recite Kaddish, there's like all these words that we're like, what? Where's that? We don't have those words, right? So it's Nusach, but they have a different, you know, different set of text. Whereas, you know, minhag or a custom would be like in a Sephardic shul, you take out the Torah, and what do you do next? You hold it up like this and say, Vezot HaTorah, Asher Samoshe, whatever melody you use. You put the Torah down and you read it. Exactly the opposite of what Ashkenazim do.
So they don't do it.
They don't do after, right? So, and actually, when you think about it, the Sephardic tradition would make so much more sense, right? Because what, you know, he's saying, this is the Torah that Moses promulgated to the Jewish people, the word of God. And then you read it, as opposed to like reading and saying, oh, this is what we just did,
Yeah.
right? So it actually makes, you know, that minhag actually makes more sense in terms of, now that's not really Nusach, that's minhag. So there's an example of Nusach versus minhag. So Nusach actually refers to the structure and the actual text of the service. And of course, also refers to melody. And minhag would refer to something a little different. Right?
Would they not have to do Galila because, like with Sephardim, if they have a Torah that's like a case, you know,
Right,
like some,
yeah. So Mike, I don't know if you can hear Michael, but Michael's asking the question, like in many Sephardic shuls, they use a Torah that's encased like the one that we have in the Ark in the sanctuary, which we pretty much never use, but it has a metal case. So there's really no wrapping of that scroll, right? You just close it. You close it and lock it. So there's no galila in that sense. Although that could be considered a combo to lock it and close it. But, okay. So and we talked about Nusach, the melodic structure of Nusach being that it's usually 2, maybe 3, maybe an extended 4th part, but you usually have like a small series of melodies that join together to create the Nusach for a particular, for a particular service, right? So you have like you mentioned that with the term chatima. Do you remember that term? I might have thrown it out like really quickly.
To
Yeah,
seal.
seal, right? Seal or closing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That, by the way, that word comes up. Oh, in Megillat Esther, that word comes up 1 billion times.
Oh, I was gonna say during Yom Kippur, during the.
Yeah.
days of-
Gamar Chatima Tova, right?
Yeah, well, Michael also says Gamar Chatima Tova,
Yeah.
exactly, right? Right.
Sandy
It actually appears in Shir HaShirim, Simeni Kachotam Alibecha, make me a seal upon your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful text. I love that. So yeah, so it means a seal. So the Fatima is really like it's like the closing melody. That's usually the most iconic melody. And once you can get the Fatima, then you can fake it through almost any service if you know the Fatima for the service. So we have in Kabbalat Shabbat. So you have that's be the Chatima. Wait, whatever. That's it. Sorry, that's Marv. I'm doing the wrong melody. I was giving you Marv because that's what's in my head. So let's see. We have if you think about Fatima of Kabbalat Shabbat. Right. Would be the seal, the Fatima. And then you have these different, like leading, pre-closing and pre-closing and then beginning melodies. So that's really kind of the structure, excuse me, in general of the Nusach. So we started last week looking at the evening service for Friday night. So the evening service for Friday night structurally is for the most part the same as any evening service with some peculiarities, but the beginning part is the same as any evening service. But the melody is really distinctive and iconic. It's the only time that you use that melody. The same way with Kabbalat Shabbat. It's the only time that you use the melodies for that. It's the only time for that. So those peculiarities are really, I think, kind of essential, to kind of getting at the Jewish calendar and consider with the Jewish Gestalt. We used to say that 100 years ago, you could drop any Jew in a shul and someone would start singing and they know exactly where if it was morning, if it was evening, if it was a holiday, if it was a festival, or anything like that, just because they would hear the Nusach and know. But I think you have to say it's 200 years ago because we have like 100 years of people that don't know. So that's kind of a change there. Okay, so let's look at Marv, which we started last week, and I didn't get a chance to research this because I was going to ask the question, but I'll make sure to look for it next week. Remember that I mentioned a very odd melody that only appears once ever in the liturgy, and it appears in the Friday night service. And the great masters of Nusach could not come up with a name for it. We have Adonai Malach, we have Ahava Rabbah, we have all these different names for the prayer modes. But this one was named a very weird name. Anybody remember that from last week? Okay, it's George.
Right.
George.
That sounds familiar now that
Yeah.
you said it.
Yeah, right, so let's look at that, so let's, if you all have the Siddur, Sim Shalom. Sorry, Lev Shalom, I keep saying Sim Shalom.
I have Sim Shalom.
You have Sim
An
Shalom, okay,
old Sim Shalom.
yes, but you have
Do you
the,
want me to
that's what
grab
they call the Slim Shalom.
this?
Yes, right, thank you.
As opposed, the first one that came out, like, it had everything in it, and it was a really big book, but then when you got the pocket version,
Yeah.
you need, like, you needed like a little a telescope, I'm sorry, a microscope to read
Yeah.
it.
Do you
So-
want me to get one so you can get?
no, I don't
numbers
think so.
to
I don't
Sandy,
think
or
so.
Sandy knows
Sandy,
it well enough.
Sandy, if we use the pages from Lev Shalem, you'll be able to find where we are.
I'll
there.
find it, absolutely. Yep,
Um,
just, are we going after Shema,
So no, we're looking actually right at the beginning of our, so some,
right at the beginning? Baruch Hu?
Baruch Hu, which I think, I don't know what page it's on in that book, I should have known it.
28 in my book.
It's 20, it's okay, yeah. So it's 39 in the Lev Shalem. Right, so you have that opening, this is the iconic melody. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Remember that? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So that's really like your opening melody. And you use that opening melody for the conclusion, that opening melody, the conclusion of the prayers. Like if you look at the Uma Avia Yom, maybe Lila text, that's a little character arrow there. Uma Avia Yom, maybe Lila, you get the same set of melodies, right? So that's the opening melody. And then you have this is the George. El Chai V'Kayam Tamidim L'Chaleinu. So that little melody there, El Chai V'Kayam. So no one knows what that came from. It's not part. It doesn't belong in the Nusach, but it's the Nusach. So that's what the pundits call George.
Dan,
Yeah.
I've been in many Friday night services in my life. Through
Yeah.
Camp Ramah and home and all those things.
Yeah,
I
but
never heard that. I would have said, El Chai V'Kayam Tamidim L'Chaleinu L'Olam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Amari V'Ravi. I wouldn't have done that other little funky thing.
okay, so that's interesting because that's like one of those like essential. That's like one of the moments that people listen for. It's like Kol Nidre, It's
So
like,
I've been missing it all that time?
well, that's because you probably learned at Camp Ramah where they
Did.
That's right. And Jewish summer camps, what they do is they kind of like zip through and buzz through melodies and not really paying close attention to the new stuff.
Okay.
Now, you can actually not do that and it's still in the new song. You can do Adonai Tzevot Shemo, Adonai Tzevot Shemo, El Chai V'Kayam, Tamidim L'Chaleinu L'Olam Va'ed. You could do that, and that's fine.
Okay.
Sticking within the new song, which is fine, but you're just missing out on one of the like fun moments. It's like when you come to Shabbat Mincha and you have that part of the repetition, da 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 da, right? But then you sing along with it. It happens only 7 times in the whole Shabbat Mincha service. Right, it's like this special little melody. Now, if you didn't do that, you can still do it within the Nusach, but then you're missing like one of the essential points of it, So anyway, it's like you could chant in the Torah, you could chant Shirat Hayam to regular Torah trope. I have to look at it to see, but instead of doing Az Yeshem Moshe B'nai Yisrael, like it's Shabbat Shira, instead of doing that melody, you could do. I have to find it. Well, I'm not going to find it here. But you can do it in a regular Torah trope, and that's perfectly legal to do. But what you're really doing is like you're missing all the good stuff. It's like having bologna on white bread with mayo instead of having a hand cut remaining in pastrami on a
Pastrami on
hoagie
a-
roll with spicy mustard. You know,
Right.
you know,
Got
what are you gonna say? You gonna settle for the bologna? No, of course not. I don't know. Oh, you know, I'm thinking about that. This is like, I just read, now this is from the internet, which means that it's probably not true. But I read that Ryan's Deli put on an ad, you know, Ryan's Deli, right? It's
Yeah.
the one
Words.
on 84, you know, it's like.
Yeah.
Yes, know it-
Up there
know
when
it very well.
you're-
Right, so they're advertising, you know, apparently there's a national shortage of corn, of distribution issue with corned beef. So they can't get corned beef and pastrami and brisket, so they say, but come and try our rolled beef and our turkey and our tongue and, you know. It's like,
Oh, that's hysterical.
yeah, you know, it's like, my point is, if I'm going to a kosher deli, it doesn't have corned beef,
Yeah,
I'm leaving.
that's right. That's
I-
right.
I'd rather stop at McDonald's and get a fisherman jig.
Yeah. You don't mean that, Dan. Oh,
Don't actually, that would be like, oh God.
that would be pretty bad.
I had one of those once in my life because there's like no place else to eat something. And you know, you have this, like, this little sandwich like this big, and I was like full for 2 days.
Oh,
Yes,
Because it's like, there's no real food in it.
I know, it's horrible. It's horrible. Yeah.
So, yeah, all right, so. Yeah, hi, there's your George. Tamid yimloch aleinu li'olam va'ed. Then you back already into the Nusach. And you have Baruch atah Adonai haMakim. The same as Baruch hu atah Adonai mevorach. Now, once you've got that, then you can do
Uh-huh.
the entire Marav service, Arby, in the, you know, it may not be exciting or particularly interesting, but you're doing a halachically traditional Ashkenazi, you know, Nusach. No, do you guys remember what I talked about at the beginning of the last lesson about whether the opening of Marav, and actually Marav itself is major or minor? Do you remember we had a little conversation about that? I don't know if you remember that or not. Yeah, right. So there was a time that you know, that it was actually in major. Baruch hu atah Adonai haMevorach, Baruch Adonai Barach li'olam va'ed. Right? L'ma'aviv u'milayla Adonai ha'ma'aviv ha'ravim. So there was a time, and that really came mostly from Sephardic Jews, who were the first ones in the United States, right? The Sephardic Jews were the first ones here. And it was only when you had the wave after wave after wave of European and then German and then European, immigrants who kind of like swallowed up any Ashkenazic traditions that were mostly left in the country.
you mean any Sephardic? They swallowed up any Sephardic.
Yeah, the
traditions, right? Not
Ashkenazim swallowed up the Sephardic, so that they were like, they were, for every Sephardic congregation, they were like, like 100, Ashkenazic. Okay. So then you had this tradition of going into the minor, which was really the Ashkenazic tradition. And there's some among us that remember when there was a Nusach shift that happened. It really happened like in the 50s and 60s. So I don't really remember that because I'm a little young for that. But one of our members has done it very occasionally on Friday night. Frank Aronson, you guys know Frank, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
first time Frank got up on a Friday night, Frank, want to daven Kabbalah Shabbat? Sure, I'd love to. Baruch hu atah Adonai haMevorach, Baruch Adonai Barach li'olam va'ed. So he did it in both, right? Because he lived that era. He lived that era where it was transforming from this to that. The same way that my Sephardic pronunciation is very iffy. The way that most we pronounce Hebrew in Sephardic pronunciation now, because that's what they do in Israel, right? But I grew up with a very Ashkenazic, pronunciation. So I have a lot of ingrained Ashkenazic pronunciations. I say Adonai. I say Adonai, not Adonai.
So do I.
Yeah, it's Adonai. And at one point, someone asked me why I was saying that. I said, saying what? You're saying Adonai. I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? No, it's Adonai. I said, oh yeah, grammatically it would be. That's correct, right? So these things that are inculcated, like in your mother's milk, so to speak, right? Are there, right? So anyway, so you have that combination of back and forth. But once you have that basic melody, you're good to go. Now, the thing about both Kabbalat Shabbat and Ma'ariv and Arv. Oh, by the way, so I keep saying Ma'ariv, but that's actually totally wrong, right? That's not the name of the service. What's the name of the service for 200 points?
Arvit.
Great.
Arvit is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you both said it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because ma'ariv is a verb. Right, where arvit is a noun.
Okay.
So it really should be called arvit. I mean, colloquially, everybody says ma'ariv, even the ordained cantors who know better, will still say, the ma'ariv now. The rabbis.
The Siddur says Mariv. Mariv for Shabbat and festivals.
Yeah, well, that's not yours. This really the Sim Shalom. I'm surprised they made that error.
Yeah. But in Hebrew, it says Arvit l'Shabbat.
Yeah.
Yom Tov. Yeah.
So
I
they
never
made
noticed that.
a compromise and said, let's do it right on one side of the page and
Right.
on one side of the page. Just
Right.
an issue, yeah. So it really should be called Arvit. Yeah. And not Arvit, but Arvit, because it's, accent on the second syllable.
Right.
All right, so but again, like I said, with Kabbalat Shabbat, if Arvit, you have this long history of because Friday night is like it doesn't really matter what time you get home from shul. Because like everybody had nothing but cholent on the stove anyway, so it's just like it doesn't really matter because the cholent was like cooking for 3 hours or 5 hours. So you have all these added melodies. Like here's the thing, like you could daven in basic Nusach, Kabbalat Shabbat, and Arvit, and you could be done in a half an hour, maybe even a little less. Right? If you just stick into the plain Nusach without adding any melodies, right? Right. Now, most of the time, Friday night services are an hour or a little bit more. And why is that? Because you're thinking, well, people are going to schlep to shul, you're going to give them something, right? And it's like I always feel bad this time of year when people come to services on any weekday night, and especially like if Wes is leading it, it's done in like 9 minutes.
Right.
I just drove here from Weston to say Kaddish, and it took me like 40 minutes each way, but the service was like 9 minutes, right? So you need to we stretch it a little bit, right? But these melodies are really they're really meant as an enhancement, to the service, right? To make it what's the word? Hidur mitzvah, to beautify the mitzvah, right?
Yeah.
That's why you have to have the best etrog. Have you ever seen the people with the magnifying glasses buying their etrogim?
Because I pick that, I rely on your order.
When people go in and they'll take like magnifying glasses to look to see which has the nicest bumps and everything. It's like because they want to do Hidur mitzvah. And I've seen people like line up like 8 or 10 lulavim, like the big ones, and they'll make sure that theirs is like by millimeter the largest one. That kind of thing. So, I really have seen this. Like, if you go to Borough Park around Sukkot, just to pick up a lulav etrog, you better be prepared. It's like, what was it? There was one of those TV shows, I forget which one, where somebody not Jewish was sent to pick up food at a kosher deli, and they were not able to actually do it because of all the ladies, the men and the women, and they're pushing and they're shoving and they're yelling, and he said, I want a place, and like very politely, right? That's kind of.
And I just
Yeah.
I just read an article, I think in the tablet it was, about New Zealand, because they have such very strict laws regarding importation of any kind of foodstuffs or
Right.
or anything that relates to plants or animals.
Yeah,
They get one lulav and one etrog for the entire shul. And afterwards, they have to take it to the whichever department, and it is burned. And in the meantime, while during the 8 days of Sukkot, it's in a very sequestered area of the shul for fear of any kind of infection. So
wow. Well,
that means that, you know, the myrtle branch always loses its leaves, so they have to save those leaves even, and those shriveled up leaves also. But they have no idea of what we go through to get a lulav and etrog, because they appoint one person from each congregation. And so at most in the entire country, there's something like 11 lulavim.
wow.
Yeah,
That's,
exactly.
that's so interesting. Wow.
And that's like it's regular, it's not just for COVID, like it was a practice in earlier years.
Michael's asking, that wasn't just in the era of COVID, right? It's been
No,
like
no,
that.
no. Even before, New Zealand has always had very strict laws to protect their native flora and fauna.
Yeah, you think about it, I mean, like, New Zealand is like, it's an island and there's stuff there that doesn't, it's like, I'm gonna introduce a new plant to the Galapagos or something. No, you can't do that. I mean, look, those damn British brought pigeons here, right? Right, there were no pigeons,
Oh,
there were no pigeons in
in
this
North
country until the
America,
British brought them here, right? Right, and then we have all those, those Asian beetles and stuff like that, but, right, so I can see why they'd be protected of it, but that's so interesting, it's just one for each community.
Well, it's because the flora and fauna are unique to New Zealand. They don't exist anywhere else. And they're so afraid of, they always have been so afraid of destroying that ecology, the ecosystem.
Yeah, I can see that. Right, so anyway, so you have all these different melodies you can use, like on page 40, you get to Ahavat Olam. You can do it in the Nusach, you do Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, and you can do that. Or you can sing one of the many melodies, Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael, or Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael, Amacha Havta Torah Mitzvot. There's like all different melodies you can use. There's a new one, this beautiful one that we've been using for in the Gann Chapel and also Shabbat Alive, which is Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael. Right, so you can use all these different melodies, and that's just really Hebrew words. Just makes it more beautiful. But for strict davening purposes, you can just do everything in the basic Nusach. So you can do that if you want. My personal preference is every time I add a melody or import a melody into a service, I always make a point of concluding the prayer in the Nusach. Just because otherwise what's going to happen is people are going to forget that the Rashi is Nusach. Right? So that's what's going to happen, right? So like you do Kihem Chayenu Ve'orech Yameinu Ve'orech Yameinu Ovahem Nege Yoma Balayla Yoma Balayla Ve'avatcha Tesim Imenu Le'olamim Baruch Atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Right, so staying in the Nusach, right? And then of course people will sing the Shema with the Haftarah, according to the Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, which is actually out of the Nusach for Friday night. In other words, it's not meaning. What I mean is that that's not a melody you should sing at a Friday night service, right? People have become accustomed to it. That's what we do, is because that's what everybody knows. But it really should be in the Nusach. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. That's how it really should be. And until the melody that we think of as traditional was composed and then became, it's a composed piece of music. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, is a composed piece of music by Louis Lewandowski, right? It was part of a service that he wrote. So it didn't exist before him. So we're talking about the 1800s, right? Up until then, people sang it in the Nusach, right? And you wouldn't even necessarily even chant the V'ahavta, but it's a nice thing to do. It's a nice addition. Again, it's one of those things where you do Hidur Mitzvah, we add a melody. I've actually been adding a melody that I learned about 40 years ago when I was a mere child in West Hartford, which is instead of singing the V'ahavta paragraph, I'll just do the last 2 lines. And again, it's a composed melody, singing from Ukishatem La'ot al Yadecha. Ukishatem La'ot al Yadecha, Vehayu Letotafot Beinecha. Uktavtam amizuzah beitecha, uvisharecha. So I'll add that sometimes, instead of, and then the best thing that you can do as a prayer leader is to not do the same thing every time. To do the same thing maybe 2 or 3 times in a row, and then the next week do something different, or whatever prayer, do a different melody for Ahavat Olam each time, so it doesn't become rote. It becomes, when you add these melodies, you're actually perking up the congregation, so that they're not sort of stuck in being in the same place, and not actually not really participating in a real in a way that's can be more engaging. But if you throw in a different melody, people might start thinking more about, I never thought about that, and this melody works, and that's a nice prayer. I never thought about the words of this prayer, and then people get more engaged that way. Yes, Sandy, question.
Dan, I have such mixed feelings about that, because I feel that there is a comfort also in the familiar. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying about adding beauty to the service and to keep people, you didn't say this, but I'm reframing, on their toes, and they don't get, kind of, just go along with it without even noticing it. But there's something something very comforting about going in and hearing things we're familiar with. For example, I mean, I've gone to Shabbat Alive a lot since its very beginning.
Right.
I still can't get over that we don't do the traditional Yigdal, which is, I mean, there are 2 different tunes that I'm familiar with Yigdal that I love, and I'll never get used to the Yigdal. And I used to, like when I'm in your service in the chapel, I love Yigdal, but when I'm there, I just can't get used to it. So I think that there's 2 sides of it. There's a nice, I get that, a new tune is often beautiful and adds to service, keeps us on our toes. But I think that there's also something very comforting about.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
I'm in 100% agreement. So I think that, that it's okay to add new tunes occasionally. Like once a month or once every 5 weeks. And then eventually you begin to go a little more often, then it becomes more like, oh yeah, I remember that tune.
Right.
And then you get that, you develop a comfort level. If you throw 5 or 6 new melodies in one week, and then the next week you have 5 or 6 new melodies, which are different from the one you did the week before, then that doesn't work either. It really has to be done in a carefully thought out, like a pedagogic way, where you say, you can do this melody, you can do that melody, that kind of thing. So, and also, I mean, I think for the prayer leader also, it actually engages the prayer leader a little bit to do something a little different, not each time, but occasionally as well. To think about things more thoughtfully. Like for instance, like Sandy, like when I begin Kabbalat Shabbat, and I do second time, Shabbat is coming on.
Mhm.
Shalom Aleichem Malach. So I
Yeah.
added that little nigun, which I actually learned. It's got beautiful words to it, and I start to do that regularly. And then occasionally when I don't do it, someone says, "You didn't start Shalom Aleichem the traditional way, right?"
Yeah.
So then that becomes, the traditional way. You all know that joke about the person that complains to the cantor about the one song he knows, right? I told this one last week too. It's a very old, someone comes up to the Chazan and says, "Chazan, every time I hear you cantor, I love it. I love you singing. I love your voice. It's always so powerful. It's also beautiful. But don't you know anything more than that one song?" And the cantor says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Every time I hear you, every single time I hear you, the only thing you sing is Kol Nidre." Don't you know anything else?
That's funny.
Right, so there is a, yes, and yeah, singing the Shema Yisrael, that comfort level of everybody knowing it and singing along.
Yeah.
But, so that is important. I agree. And if you don't do it every single week, but do it like 4 weeks out of 5, or
Mhm.
3 weeks out of 5, then you still have that comfort level. But then every once in a while, something different then comes more traditional as the more you do it. And then people get more accustomed. The same way that it probably took like 20 years or more for the Nusach for the Friday Nusach to settle into minor. There was probably a 20-25 year period where one shul is this and one shul is that, and even within a congregation. Also the joke about, the new rabbi that starts in the shul and he comes to the first Shabbat and they get to the Shema and half the people are standing up and half the people are sitting down, and the people are standing up and going like this, and the people are sitting down and going like that, right? And so the rabbi says, well, what's the minhag? He says the minhag. So it's the person who says, well, I don't know, we're not really sure, but there's Chaim. He's 100 years old in the nursing home, but he's been a member like forever. Let's ask Chaim what the minhag is. Chaim, do we stand up for the Shema? No. Chaim, do we sit down for the Shema? No. Well, right now, half the congregation stands up, half the congregation sits up, sits down, and they go like this, and they go like that, and yell at each other. He says, "That's the minhag."
That's cute.
By the way, truth be told, when I first started here, I literally lived that for as long as Rabbi Teal was here. Because in the sanctuary on Shabbat morning, we rose for the Shema. Right?
Really? I didn't remember that.
Oh yeah,
Another.
I remember doing that my first Shabbat here, and I'm thinking like, what the? And then someone says, "Open the ark for Lena," and we're going like, what the hell is this place?
Yeah. Well, opening the ark for Elena is a uniquely Temple Emmanuel thing.
And we don't even do it universally anymore. But that's
Not anymore.
Not
Not in the chapel, but yes, in the sanctuary.
You'd still be doing the chapel if whoever hung the curtain did it right.
Yeah.
That's actually true, because it became embarrassing because people couldn't get the thing open.
Funny.
Like, you have like Bunny to come to open the ark, but she couldn't do it. So you have to help her.
Right.
It was like that's why we stopped doing it, because it was a tircha, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's a little bit about the Nusach, right? There. Right, and then when you get to the Michamoch, a little further down, this is very Friday evening service has its own very special, unique melody, right? Which you don't hear any other time of year, ever, except for this service. But then, with Michamocha, you have all different kinds of melodies. You can do Michamocha. I'm on page 44 in the left shalom. I don't know page it's on the shalom. You have Michamocha. Malchut Tov Razon Kilo Lehem Moshe Uvnei Yisrael Lechanu Shira B'Simcha Rava B'Yamut Kulam Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai. Now people sing that melody. That's completely 100% out of the Nusach for Friday night, but yet it's what people do. So it gives a comfort level. It really should be not. You really should stay in the what's called it's called it's a minor key. It's the not the relative minor, but I forget what name. it should stay in that melody. But people do the other one, and then people, but then you shift back and forth. That's a tricky part. You should have to shift back and forth. If you come to show all the time and you just listen to it and inculcate it and learn it, that's the way it's done. When a musician looks at this, they say, "What the hell," right? Because if it's written out, then you're going like from 2 sharps. No, you're going from 1 flat to 3 flats back to 1 flat in the key signature, and it's like it changes everything, right? But then you say, "Well, I don't get it. What's going on here?" Well, because the congregation likes to sing this in the melody that's not part of the Nusach, then we go back to it. So. When you have me, which is like more of an upbeat melody, can do that. So any one of those 3 or many more melodies. Again, it's a powerful moment in the service. So having any number of melodies is really helpful. To think about. So if you do any one of those 3 right now, people feel comfortable about all of those 3 because they've been interchanged, so much. All right, then we have Hashkivenu. Again, all kinds of beautiful melodies for Hashkivenu. And then if you look at page 46 for Shamru, you have the Shamru B'nai Yisrael or Shamru B'nai Yisrael. And probably 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other melodies you can do also, but the ones people will feel more comfortable with. The Chatzi Kaddish, I think I asked this question last time on page 46, the Chatzi Kaddish before the Amidah. And anyone recall what the melody is for that?
Yitgadal Yikadash Shmei Rabbah.
No, that is not correct.
I knew it was wrong.
I think it's a Sandy minus.
I got a demerit.
Minus 100 points. But I feel like Alex Trebek.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
not it.
Final Jeopardy.
That's not it. So
Okay.
here's the thing. But many people will do that, but that's not correct.
But that is, it's correct for a certain time of day, isn't it?
Yes, Michael say it's correct.
Right.
That's not the kind of is correct for a certain service, but not for this one. But not for this one.
Okay.
It's like this. It's Yitkadal, Yitkadal.
Oh, yes.
Okay, now, when else do you hear that melody? When else do you hear that melody? Right after is your Yamod, Hamadiyah, V'tamod, Hagolelet.
So it's
For
during the Torah service.
during which Torah service, Michael?
Shabbat morning.
Shabbat morning.
Yeah. Okay.
So that for some odd reason, the melody for this Chatzi Kaddish is done only twice. That melody, one time is Friday night, the other time is Chatzi Kaddish for Shabbat morning.
And
Festivals,
only Chatzi Kaddish, not
Yes.
a full Kaddish.
not a full Kaddish, and
Right.
on festivals is a different Chatzi Kaddish at the Torah service. So that's it's unique, but we also will oftentimes do, and you guys know this melody because you've been in the chapel enough on a Friday night. Right. So that's a melody. It's a beautiful composed melody. It's in the Nusach. It's what's in the framework of the Nusach of Friday night. Anyone know who wrote it? 200 points. You can gain your notoriety back. I'll give you a hint.
Don't say it's Shlomo Kava.
No, it's not Shlomo Kava.
Good.
Charles David Osborne.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, he wrote that. Yeah, it's actually a 4-part. It's a setting for cantor and a 4-part choir. It's a beautiful setting. But he wrote that, for Friday night service. And it's within the structure of the Nusach pattern, for Arvit on Friday night. So.
Is it used beyond the?
No. I would say yes. What's really interesting is, I think we can get a little parochial here, like, when we do Hallel and we do Hallelujah Adonai Ki Tov, right now, again, 10 years ago, you never would have heard that.
Well, because he wrote it longer than 10 years ago. didn't
Whatever, 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Right, whatever, he wrote it for a dedication of some sort for the temple. He wrote a whole Hallel service.
he?
for the
Yeah,
temple.
I remember.
Right, and that's it. So we all know that. What's interesting is that I was looking at, there's a book that's called Shirenu, which is like tunes that you can use. So, for song leaders, for cantors and stuff, and it's in there. And I know a bunch of the people that I would, that I started off with at school that are already now ordained cantors because they don't have full-time jobs and they can get on with their lives. They said, "Oh yeah, I know this one. I love this." Right, and they've been doing it for years. Right, I always thought that the only temple of Maine people knew it, but it's out there now. So there's all kinds of different melodies. So Charles has written a lot of beautiful music. He actually, did you guys ever hear? Well, the two big oratorios that he wrote for Hanukkah Happens. One was called "Souls on Fire," based on
Yes.
the text of Elie Wiesel, and his friend, cantor Arya Finkelstein wrote the libretto. He's got like two or three books of poetry published. Arya
Are you
Finkelstein.
as well?
Yeah, beautiful. He's a beautiful poet. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So they collaborated on the score and the lyrics and the score for Souls on Fire, but they used just the orchestral part. Because I was watching a movie, and I'm listening. For some reason, the music in the background hit me. I said, I know this music. Right, and then at the end they showed that it was actually Charles renamed it like Sweet, Sweet for something or other, and they used that the score for one of the movements of Souls on Fire as background music in a movie in Hollywood. Yeah, it was pretty cool actually.
Wow.
Gorgeous stuff. Right? Anyway, so you can have composed pieces of music, and so much stuff is composed. Shalom Aleichem Malachei Asher is a composed piece of music. It's it's maybe barely 100 years old. Barely. I think it was written in 1926. And I forget who wrote it. But Shalom, I forget the name of the composer. But a famous Jewish composer wrote it, and everybody thinks, oh, it's been around like forever. No, it hasn't. It's like barely 100 years old, which, because the Jewish tradition that makes it very new, right?
Mhm.
Was it like something like that? Was it even composed so that it's relatively easy and accessible for people who
Yeah,
aren't
because-
necessarily musically talented? Myself
Yeah,
included.
it's a lot of melodies are, a lot of are written specifically for,
The musically challenged.
to make it easy.
Which I include
Yeah.
myself in that.
There's no reason not to do that, right? By the way, this is why most of the Nusach is in the key of D or D minor, because it never goes too low and it never goes too high. So most people can sing along, and most prayer leaders can do it, right? But when you get to like the festivals, most of the Nusach is higher, and most of the composed pieces are higher because most of it is meant for someone more professional in their sound and more in bringing stuff out like that. So and it's been like stuff for the high holidays, it gets gets high. Like the Cantonese that Elias does, which is like, oh my God, it's like,
Yeah.
I miss that so much.
Yeah.
I was with Elisa for the high holidays, so I didn't get to hear Elias sing. By the way, the one that he does, you know who wrote that?
No.
Meyer Finkelstein.
Oh, really?
The guy who wrote, right now, look, again, 10 years ago, you weren't hearing that piece very much. And now it's become, and then because, oh, that's Nusach. Everybody knows that. That's part of it. It's been around forever. No, it hasn't. But if it's done so much, then it
Yeah.
becomes part of the Nusach, right? The same way they went from major to minor, right? In the stuff. I mean, the same way we talked about this before. The same way that that everybody knows the text and a melody for Aleinu, like every morning and every night people sing that. When in fact, anybody recall when the Aleinu was written specifically for? I know you remember that, Julie.
Rosh Hashanah.
Exactly right. For the Aleinu prayer was written specifically and only for the Malchuyot section of the Musaf service of Rosh Hashanah. The one that we go, Aleinu L'Shma. That was, it was only used once a year for that purpose. For God's kingship. But after the coronation, okay, the only time we bow down, right? It was because of the coronation of the king. And that's in the Malchuyot section of the Musaf service of Rosh Hashanah. It wasn't used for anything else ever. And now it's like people can sit there through the entire service and not know anything. And you get to Aleinu L'Shma. Oh, I know that. And it's like, well, yeah, and it's great to know that, but but knowing the history makes it a little bit different than understanding it. Right. Hold on a second. I was just going to check something. Oh, Israel Goldfarb. Israel Goldfarb, who, I mean, for people that know anything about Jewish music and cantorial music, Goldfarb was like, he's one of the great standards of compositions of the 20th century, end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. Oh, actually, it's earlier. Maine is 1918. So it's actually like a little over 100 years old now. Yeah. All right. There we go. He was one of the famous guys. Right, and then anyone know the melody for the Amidah for Arvit?
You don't want to hear me sing. You absolutely do not.
Just want to know if anyone knows the melody.
Mhm.
I'm not even sure I know the correct melody, but it would be unrecognizable if I tried, I assure you.
Is it
Michael-
always done silent?
Yes, Michael has it. Michael, can you say it louder? So
Okay, it's always done silently, like there's not a repetition of.
Right, right.
This Amidah is never ever sung out loud. So there is no Nusach for this Amidah. It's a trick question. They tried when I forget how many years ago, I had actually gone to try out at the Jewish Theological Seminary to be a cantor many years ago. And they said, come back when you can play a keyboard instrument and a wind instrument. And I said, okay, that's never gonna happen.
Yes.
Never went back. But what got me like to say, they said you're accepted except when you have to come back and do these two things, but when you can start school. But they tried to get you with this trick question. They said, what's the melody for the Amidah for Friday night? And I said, I said, don't you guys know there isn't a melody? A little chutzpah to say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so there is no melody for this. Is never done. But we talked about this last time too. This is a section that's called Me'ain Sheva. So that's on page 53 in the Lev Shalem. And it says Me'ain Sheva on it. Symbolic repetition of the Amidah. Right, so this, I guess the same answer would hold for any evening service, right? Even yet, whenever you come to Marav, right, we don't begin out loud, and we don't do any repetition, right? The evening service is never done out loud. So why is that? Anybody know?
No.
Right. So the answer is that the whole idea, the Arvit service is actually like a little controversial in the Masechet Brachot. If you read one of the early tractates of the Talmud, I think it's the first one. It's called Masechet Brachot. It talks about services, about when you say this, when you say that, and this is whole section of like, how do we get the prayer services? They said, well, Shacharit it's based on Abraham. So Abraham got up early in the morning, and what did he do early in the morning? He wanted to sacrifice Isaac, but that's a different question. But because why did he get up early? Because he always got up early so he could do shacharit. That's what the rabbis. Of course, there was no shacharit back then, but the rabbis kind of like superimposed it. And then Yitzchak, Isaac, right? It says he was wandering in the fields in the afternoon, right? So they said, oh, well, why was he in the fields in the afternoon? Well, he looked for a quiet place to daven mincha, right? That's what the rabbis say. But there's no text for Yaakov about like doing something late in the evening, or the late afternoon. So the rabbis kind of made up something about an evening prayer service. So there's a couple things that we don't have in the evening prayer service. One of them is there's a question about whether you even really have the Amidah or not. So that's why you have a silent rendition of the Amidah without saying it out loud or doing a repetition. So that happens. So that's true of every evening service. So of course there wouldn't be one for for Friday night. But the rabbis, the framers of the Siddur, and I think this even goes back to Saadia Hagaon, what's from 600s, I think. Medieval, so a little later than that, actually. In this Siddur, but the whole idea is that this section is called Be'ein Sheva. So what is Sheva? 7, right?
7.
So Be'ein Sheva means something like 7. So what does the 7 refer to? I feel like this is the way Wes is going to go off to Israel. It wasn't here because Arnie Goodman's going to be having some radiation treatment.
Yeah.
But don't tell anybody. Said that. So, but whenever Rabbi Goodman would come and give his Oratorios in the chapel, on Friday nights, we'd like, oh, Rabbi Goodman's here, yay, right?
Yay.
He would do the same thing. He'd say, why? Then he'd answer a question, right? So why 7? Well, I'll be Rabbi Goodman and I'll say, well, how many brachot are there in the Amidah? How many brachot are there in the Amidah?
Well, because when we call it the Shemona Esrei.
Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking, Michael.
But is it shorter
So
on Shabbat?
This is as confusing as it can be. The Shemona Esrei, which means what?
18.
8. And how many brachot are there in the Amidah?
I'm going with 18.
No, 18 is wrong. There are 19.
19.
There are 19. Yeah, thank you, Judith. Yeah, there are 19. But that's a whole different question, right? There was actually it's an interesting question. People say, well, there were 18, but then they added a blessing, and that's the blessing of Velamal Shini Maltahitikva, for the apostates let there be no hope. Right? That's in the weekday, and that's the one that the person recites in the weekday. They do it very quietly. But whoever says that is 100% wrong, because that was actually one of the earliest parts of the Amidah. There's 2 parts of the Amidah that are about Jerusalem and the restoration of the country at Semach, the Yerushalayim Yercha, and then at Semach David. At one point, that was 1 bracha, and then at some point, some scribe miscopied it as 2 separate ones, and then it became 2 separate brachot. So that's the answer. So really, 19 brachot. There are 7. There are in the Shemona Esrei, and then, but that's not true on Shabbat and on festivals, because in the Amidah, the first 3 blessings and the last 3 blessings of every single Amidah are the same, and what happens in the middle is specific. So on a weekday, there were 13 brachot that are actually what we call petitionary. We say, God, please do this for us. God, give us that. God, please do that for us. God, do this for us. God, do that for us, right? On Shabbat, God saying, I'm taking, I got my feet up. Now Shabbat, I'm resting, right? So the 13 brachot in the middle disappear. And they're replaced with what's called bracha de Yoma. It means the blessing of that day, right?
Mhm.
So there's 3. The first 3, the last 3 are the same. The one in the middle, the 13 disappear. There's one in the middle, and that's the bracha. So that's the middle bracha. So for Shabbat, there are 4 different brachot for the middle of the Amidah. One on Friday night, one on Saturday Shacharit, one on Saturday Nusach, and one at Mincha. So the first week and the last week are the same and all the time. But the four in the middle of the four middle brachot change. So this is the one on Friday night. The main Sheva one is actually what's called the middle brachot. The middle bracha, it's Magain Avot. So that's what happens here. All right, anyway, so go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I gotta get.
Michael has to leave. Michael's leaving us. I know it's 9:04. The Zoom is gonna keep running for 20. Let's just mention to Michael that both Zosh, who works here, and myself forgot to shut off the recording last time. So when someone came into the classroom on Monday to teach a class, a Tuesday, and it was still recording for like 20.
Oh, no.
I was like, there's a blank room for like 20 hours.
Oh, that's crazy.
Okay.
So Michael,
I'm sorry, but I
Michael,
gotta
yeah.
go.
I'll send you some 5-page paper due next week.
Okay.
Right.
All right, Michael, have a
I'll
good
take
night.
what maybe it's a
Bye,
Jewish.
Mike.
It's a Jewish holiday. Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye, say.
Bye.
Michael's going home to put the brisket in the oven.
Right, well, we'll do it. Okay, take care, bye-bye.
Sounds good.
Anyway, so we have this main Sheva, it means it's kind of like a repetition of the Amidah, because you have that middle paragraph there on page 53. I don't know what page it says in the Sim Shalom. You have Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Adonai, Eloheinu Eloheinu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Hayah HaGibor, Hayah HaNorah HaGibor HaNorah, Elohim Konei Shemayim Va'aretz. Right? That's like the beginning of all the Amidahs. But it doesn't, but that's where it stops, right? So that part of it, we've seen Vayikulu, which is like Vayikulu, sorry. We have this beginning part of the Amidah, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just the bracha of sanctification of Shabbat. On page 54, it says Shabbat. So there's really it's not like a repetition of the Amidah. It's like a teaser of what the Amidah is like. It's like Me'ain Sheva means it's kind of like this one of the middle bracha, which becomes the seventh bracha. And then you get to the Kaddish Shalem, and this is Yikara V'Yikara Shemei Rabbah. So we all know this one, right? You could do this, by the way. There's always sometimes uncertainty about this, and people have had different. Many different cantors and cantor coaches and Nusach experts say that you can do Yikadal V'Yikadal Shemei Rabbah or Yikadal V'Yikadal Shemei Rabbah. You can do it either in major or minor, and either one is considered okay for this Chatzikah. I always do it in the major because it's going to get me into the Kiddush even more. All right, last thing. Why do we say Kiddush on Friday night in the show? And with this, we'll start for today.
Oh, boy, I knew this at one time.
I don't know.
What's the point of Kiddush? Yeah, why do it? You should really do it where?
Home.
Oh,
Right, when you're gonna sit down and eat, right?
Yeah.
Are you sitting down to eat in the show?
No.
No, not in the service, right?
No.
You're having a dinner afterwards, but then you do Kiddush again, right? So this has to be part of the service, right? This wasn't always part of the service. It became part of the service again in the Middle Ages, because there were itinerant travelers who would come to a town and they'd have no place to stay. So they could sleep in the shul, and the shamas would make them a little meal. So this is why the Kiddush is there. It's a residual of the fact that there were people that used to actually eat in the shul.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't that all the time.
Dan, why don't they, so I will admit, I asked Wes yesterday, I was lobbying Wes yesterday to go to one day for the Chagim. And he said, no, I love the second day of the Chags. So I lost that battle. But if that notion of saying the Kiddush is for this, ancient reason that doesn't necessarily still exist, why do we keep doing it?
well, I suppose you could make the argument that there are a lot of people who don't make Kiddush at all. So I mean, if they were at home, if it depended on their doing it at home, they wouldn't do it because they're not observant enough.
Right. So that's one potential answer. Well,
Right.
you're right about the Yom Tov Sheni, right? The second day of Yom Tov.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, because, I mean, it's this balance between the power of minhag, right? The power of minhag, which is that, that there's a point where minhag, the expression is minhag kechalaka. Minhag takes on the same value, as law, right?
Yeah.
It's only say 2 days, it says 1 day, right? But we had this thing, for centuries where, you had 2 witnesses had to appear, say we saw the new moon, and then by that time we're really quite sure, and that's the same thing with this is what, so since you really weren't quite sure when the month started, you really weren't quite sure when the holiday actually started, so in case you were off by a day, you had the second day. That became, we all know the expression Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galiyot, right? The second day of Yom Tov in the diaspora, because what happened is that from Jerusalem, they would announce the holiday has started. Holiday has started. The British are coming. One if by
Right.
land, two if by sea, right? And by the time somebody would get to like Damascus, the holiday is starting tonight. Oh, does that mean like it started last night? You just got here? Or did you start a day earlier so we can know what the time the holiday started? So it's unclear. Now, nowadays, I mean, we know exactly the dates. We know the holidays, right?
right.
So
It's crystal clear.
it's clear. And then we also have, so again, this is where Judaism, this is where Tevye comes in.
Mhm.
Because on the one hand, it's minhag. On the other hand, the Talmud even has this expression that says that you don't do there's a Talmud, but there's a question about something that about a particular ritual, and that the rabbi said just stop doing it because it's tipshut. It's stupid. If there's a stupid thing, stop doing it. So the rabbis say this, the rabbis say that, and we end up like some shuls do this, some Reform does this. In Israel, they don't do the second day.
Yeah.
Some conservative shuls, I think, have gone to 1 day. I don't know if COVID has actually accelerated that or not.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know.
yeah, okay.
I know that, like, we have people that daven with us, like Willie Goldwasser, for example. So on the second day of Yom Tov, he'll come to the chapel and he'll take a weekday siddur and daven up to a certain point, and then he'll go on his own, and then he'll leave before Musaf, because for him it's weekday. He doesn't believe in the second day, right? So he comes and davens, but he davens kind of with us, but not kind of with us, right?
Right.
Other people that just just don't take the second day off. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there might be a point that that's going to happen, maybe within our lifetime. I don't know.
Oh, I think it's inevitable.
Yeah,
I really do.
it's possible.
I do.
Well, then in that case, I'm going to start having meat. I'm going to start having cheese with my chicken, because it's mentioned in the Talmud. There was a discussion, but there was like, it says that, you probably heard about this, right? There's a discussion about the fact that it said the chicken and the cheese were on one table and the meat was on a different table.
Oh,
Right. And you think about it, like, I did a workshop for our some of our non-Jewish, house staff, right? And when you think about it, you think about how not obvious stuff is, right?
oh, it's totally not obvious.
Not obvious, like, as a Jew growing up in a kosher home, it's
Mhm.
obvious that chicken is meat and lamb is meat. It's
Yeah.
obvious. But if you're not from the kosher culture, then you have meat and you have lamb and you have poultry, and they're not the same.
That's right.
So I know, like, even it's a couple of people that's really surprised when I said you can't have dairy with chicken. I said, really? And people that have worked here for years, I didn't know that. Really? Why not? I said, well, according to Jewish, I made these little charts. Meat equals meat, chicken, poultry. Oh, now I get it. And then, of course, how the hell do you explain parv to people?
Right. And why is fish parv?
Yeah, well, that's a good. I have no idea. I mean, when you think about it, what do you call the part of the fish that you eat? You call it the meat of the fish.
Oh, you do.
Yeah.
You do,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always,
I think a stronger argument is fish has blood, just as
yeah, fish has
mammals
blood.
have blood.
Why doesn't it? Fish has blood. I mean, some fish, most fish have blood.
Some fish, yeah.
So why doesn't it have to be, like salted and soaked and, I
Yeah,
mean, how do you, I guess you can't really shecht a fish, but maybe you could do that. I have no idea. Just take it out of water, it's gonna die anyway. But I always say, well, so fish is already salted when you buy it, so, you don't have to do that.
right.
Unless it's freshwater fish, but there's still some
Yeah.
salt.
It's complicated.
It's so complicated when I'm just trying to explain this to people, so actually the whole session was video, so people can go back and watch it because it's not obvious, right?
Right.
Not obvious.
Right.
So in the same token, like to us even in the 18, I don't know what year, like the 1200s and on, or maybe even late, 1200s, maybe even earlier, we all knew the calendar dates for the holidays. So there was maybe way even earlier than that, but so there was actually no reason to continue the idea of the second day of Yom Tov, because it's based on something that, that relied on witnesses having to appear in the at the Beit HaMikdash. Right, we don't rely on that anymore. We know the calendar date, so why do we still do this? It's a logical argument for not doing it anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I'm not sure. I think we're kind of mostly done with this. By the way, so I will have basic recordings of all the stuff that I'll either put on the website or send to you guys individually.
Oh, great.
Thank
So
you.
practice. I'd love for you, anyone to get up and lead a service. I've been pushing Hal for years to do it. I don't know why Hal can't win it. I mean, he's a professional musician, for God's sake. So
Listen, my father could have been a professional musician, and yet to hear him sing, you cringed.
oh, but Hal's I mean, he's a singer,
Hal has an
Oh.
amazing voice.
Oh, yeah, Hal, yeah. I mean, Hal, he's got a gorgeous voice.
Yeah, beautiful.
I've been singing with Hal off and on in some year for, over 40 years. Or
Wow.
close to 40 years, right? So yeah, and so he actually started the seminary and HUC a couple of times. I don't know why he didn't get it. Yeah, I mean, he could have been a cantor, without question.
Yeah.
And he's got a nice personality. He's got the right personality for it.
Yeah.
You can't live people's lives with them, except for me. I can tell everybody what to do because I'm the shaman. And then the expression, the look who thinks he's nothing story with the Hineni.
No, it's a.
Oh, so that in the old days, the Hineni prayer,
Mhm.
the Chazan would actually literally start in the back of the sanctuary and chant the Hineni prayer. Here I am, I'm not worthy of representing the people before you. My family, me, the entire community, they're relying on me, but I'm not worthy of that. I'm just not the right person, right? If you look at the text, it's very, and the Chazan will literally crawl on walk on their knees or crawl on their hands and knees down the aisle of the sanctuary singing that. So I saw that once. I didn't see it live. I saw a video of it from the old Mishkan Tefillah in Dorchester.
Wow.
It was in a documentary about Leonard Bernstein. Anyway, so they show about 30 seconds of it. Cantor Brailovsky, who was like, oh, what a fabulous cantor, and he was such an amazing composer. Stuff that he wrote, oh my God. Anyway, so which is, by the way, Leonard Bernstein's first foray into music was through the show.
Right.
He credited his cantor Brailovsky with introducing him to the glory of music. Right? This is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
I was actually talking to Emma yesterday, and she said, something about something, and she didn't really quite know who Leonard Bernstein is. I was like, who is it? And I said, West Side Story. Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
It's like the tiniest part of what he did. Right?
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, so also So the joke goes, and this is why I said, like, I can tell whether to do anything. The joke goes that the rabbi sees the chazan practicing the week before, Rosh Hashanah, practicing doing the Hineni. So the rabbi gets into the sanctuary and he starts crawling on his hands and knees and singing, "Oh, you have nothing, I'm nothing, I'm nothing."
Yeah.
And then the Shammah sees both of them and he gets on his hands and knees and he's on the rabbi and the cantor. They turn around and say, "Oh, look, he thinks he's nothing."
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's very good. Very
All
good.
right.
One
Right,
of
so-
these days I will lead, Dan. I promise you, I will
And
lead.
so I guess our next classes are going to be on are going to be on Shabbat Mincha.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah, we've done like 2 classes on each, I think, which is you don't need a lot, just the basics, and we've talked about some of the basics anyway. So
Yeah.
y'all know what Nusach is. You know that.
Yeah.
So these are the services that are like these are the services that are really unique. Now, this is not the festivals, it's not the big stuff. It's the
Yeah.
stuff that happens all the time, but it has a unique set of structures and a unique set of melodies, which really kind of enhance the prayer experience. Like I said, there was times like 250 years ago where any you could drop a traditional Jew, in a time capsule into a shul, and within like 30 seconds, I could tell you, is it weekday morning, weekday evening, is it a festival, is it Shabbos Mincha, is it Shabbat Agadol? If the rabbi's giving a sermon on a Shabbat, then it's Shabbat Agadol.
Mhm.
But rabbis didn't give sermons before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. All right, guys. Have a good night. Thank you for sticking with
you
me.
too. You too.
Having-
Thank you, Dan.